Have you ever thought you really knew your neighbors? That person you wave at every evening when you come home from work? The one who always seems friendly, always smiling, always standing right where you expect them to be? But what if one day you found out that neighbor never really existed? This story isn't about a stranger I passed once on the street. It's about someone I saw almost every single day, talked to multiple times, until I discovered he had been dead for years. And the night I learned the truth was the night he stepped inside my house. My family and I moved into that house during the last week of August. It wasn't anything fancy. A 2-story home on a quiet street, lined with big oak trees that always made the evenings look darker than they really were. The neighborhood seemed peaceful, maybe even too quiet compared to where we had lived before. I was 20 at the time, living with my parents while finishing college. So I didn't really care about the neighborhood itself, but my parents were thrilled. They kept saying things like, "It's the perfect place to settle down. No noise, no crime, just peace." The first couple of days were a blur of unpacking, setting up furniture, and trying to figure out which light switches worked for which rooms. And then, on the second night, I saw him. It was just after sunset. I was bringing a couple of empty boxes out to the curb when I noticed a man standing by the gate of the house directly across from ours. He looked older, maybe in his late 60s, dressed in a button-up shirt and slacks, kind of old-fashioned. But the thing that stood out was how still he was. He didn't lean on the gate, didn't move around. He just stood there, watching me. When I finally looked up and made eye contact, he smiled. A small, polite smile. I awkwardly waved and he gave me a slow nod, like he was acknowledging me as the new arrival. I remember thinking, well, at least one neighbor noticed we moved in. The next evening, he was there again. Same spot, same posture, as if he had been waiting for me to step outside. This time he spoke first. "Settling in all right?" he asked in a calm, low voice. I said yes, and we exchanged a few words, basic neighbor stuff. Asked about where we moved from. I asked how long he had lived there. He just smiled and said long enough. Felt normal, friendly. And yet there was something about the way he spoke, like he chose his words carefully, almost too carefully. For the next week, I saw him almost every evening. If I went out to grab something from the car or take the trash to the curb, he'd be there. Always in the exact same spot. Always with that same polite smile. He never introduced himself properly, never told me his name, and whenever I asked, he would just chuckle and say, "Names don't matter much between neighbors. We see each other enough." It was strange but not threatening, at least not yet. Looking back now, the strangest thing was how I never saw him anywhere else. Not mowing the lawn, not getting the mail, not even walking to his car. It's only there by the gate at sunset, like it was the only place he ever stood. And every time I saw him, I couldn't shake the feeling that he had been waiting just for me. The first week passed, and I almost got used to seeing him there, like some sort of neighborhood fixture. I'd step outside, and there he'd be, standing at the gate across the street, hands resting loosely on the bars, smiling that same thin smile. At first it felt kind of comforting, like we had a watchful neighbor keeping an eye on the street. But then, it started to feel different. One night around 11 p.m., I was sitting in my room finishing up a paper for school. My desk was right beside the upstairs window that overlooked the street. I was into paying attention to anything outside until I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. That same man, standing at his gate. But this time he wasn't looking at the street. He wasn't glancing around casually like someone enjoying the night air. He was staring directly at my window. At me. I froze in my chair. My room was lit, and the window blinds were half open, so if he was looking, he could clearly see me. I thought maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe he was just gazing in that direction. But as I slowly leaned to the side, his head tilted slightly, too, like he was tracking my movement. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. He just watched. I closed the blinds, heart pounding, and tried to brush it off. Old guy probably can't sleep, I told myself. Maybe he just hangs out there when he's restless. Shh. But a pit of unease sat in my stomach, and it didn't leave for the rest of the night. The next morning, I casually mentioned him to my mom. Seems like the neighbor across the street really likes to hang around his gate, I said, trying to sound casual. She frowned. Which house? I pointed out the window to the cream-colored home with the rusty gate. The one right there. Her expression didn't change, but she just said, I haven't noticed anyone. That made me feel. Because how could she not notice? He was there every evening, like clockwork. That night I decided to test it. Around 9:30 I switched off my bedroom light and sat quietly by the window. Sure enough, within minutes he appeared. Almost like he stepped out of the darkness itself, standing there, motionless, facing my house, facing me. I wanted to wave, to show him I saw him again. But something inside me told me not to move, so I just sat there, hidden behind the blinds, barely breathing. Minutes passed. Didn't fidget, didn't scratch his face, didn't shift his weight. He just stood there, like a statue planted into the ground. Finally, around midnight, I couldn't take it anymore. I went downstairs, opened the front door, and stepped outside. The street was silent. Cool air brushed against my face and across the street. The gate was empty. He was gone. No sound of footsteps. No sign of a door closing. Just empty silence, like he had never been there at all. I told myself it was paranoia. Maybe I had imagined the whole thing. But deep down, I knew what I saw. And I knew I wasn't imagining the way he looked at me. That gaze wasn't casual, wasn't neighborly. It was intentional, like he was waiting for something. Waiting for me. After a few nights of seeing him like that, I couldn't keep it to myself anymore. I needed confirmation that I wasn't going crazy. So one evening, while my dad was outside trimming the hedges, I asked him casually, "Hey, have you met the guy across the street?" My dad paused, wiping sweat from his forehead. "What guy?" I pointed directly to the cream-colored house with the rusty front gate. The older man who's always standing there. My dad looked, squinting, then shook his head. Never seen anyone there. That house has looked empty since the day we moved in. His words made me freeze. Empty. That didn't make sense. I'd spoken to him. I'd heard his voice. I'd watched him smile and nod. There was no way an empty house could explain that. The next day, curiosity got the better of me. I saw one of the neighbors, a middle-aged woman walking her dog, and decided to ask. "Excuse me," I said politely. "Do you know the man who lives across the street? In the cream house?" She stopped walking and gave me a puzzled look. "Which house?" I pointed again. Her dog barked twice, pulling against the leash, almost like it didn't want to face that direction. She frowned. "Sweetheart, nobody's lived there in years. The last person was an old gentleman, but..." She hesitated. "He passed away, a long time ago." I laughed nervously, trying to cover the chill running through me. Oh, I must have been mistaken then, but she didn't laugh with me. Instead, she gave me a strange, cautious look before walking away quickly, tugging her dog along. That night, my mind wouldn't rest. The man at the gate was too real, too vivid. I remembered the way his shirt sleeves were rolled halfway up his forearms, the way his shoes looked slightly scuffed, the deep creases in his face when he smiled. There was no way I had imagined all that detail. And yet, nobody else seemed to see him. I decided to prove it to myself. The following evening, just as the sun was setting, I sat on the front porch with my phone in hand. I didn't have to wait long. At exactly 8:12 p.m., there he was, again emerging out of the shadows, standing silently at the gate. I lifted my phone, pretending to check something, but angled it so the camera was recording the street. My heart hammered as I filmed him. For nearly 2 minutes, he didn't move, just that same thin smile staring in my direction. Finally, I lowered the phone, went inside and checked the footage. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the recording. The street was there, the house was there, the gate was there, but the man was not. Now just an empty patch of darkness where I had been certain he stood. I couldn't breathe for a moment. I replayed it again, still nothing. Just silence, just emptiness. That was the moment I realized, whatever I was seeing, it wasn't something everyone could, and worse, it wasn't something that was supposed to be seen at all. After the night with the recording, I didn't want to look outside anymore. But curiosity is stronger than fear sometimes, and mine got the better of me. The following evening, I sat by the living room window. The curtains were drawn halfway, giving me just a narrow view of the street, and like clockwork he appeared. Same place, same posture. But this time, something was different. He wasn't smiling. His expression was blank, empty. His face, once lined with polite creases, looked stiff, almost unnatural. I stared for only a few seconds before pulling the curtain shut. But later that night, when I got up to grab water from the kitchen, I made the mistake of glancing out the front window again, and he was there, still standing at the gate, still staring toward my house, only now he was a step closer. I froze in place, telling myself maybe my mind was playing tricks, maybe the streetlight was casting weird shadows. But the next night, it happened again. He appeared at the gate at sunset. And by midnight, when I looked again, he was no longer at the gate. He was standing at the edge of the street, just a few feet closer to my house. I stopped sleeping properly after that. Every night, the same ritual. He'd show up as the sky grew dark. He'd stay unmoving, unblinking for hours. And by the time the house was completely quiet, he'd be closer, always closer, till one night he was standing at the foot of our driveway. My chest tightened when I saw him there, his figure half hidden by the darkness, but his pale face, lit faintly by the streetlight, stared right at me. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I just shut the blinds and tried to convince myself to ignore it. I even tried telling my parents again, but whenever they checked, he was gone. Every single time, they told me I was stressed, overworked from college, that maybe I was dreaming. Oh, but I knew better. I was awake, wide awake. One night when I couldn't sleep, I grabbed my phone and sat by the window again, determined to catch him, to really prove he was there, and sure enough, he appeared. But this time, he wasn't across the street. He was standing halfway up our driveway. My stomach dropped. I gripped my phone so hard my knuckles went white. He didn't move, didn't speak. He just stood there, his pale eyes locked onto mine, unblinking. And in that moment I realized something that chilled me more than anything else. He wasn't smiling anymore. He looked angry. I rushed to shut the blinds, my heart slamming against my ribs. When I dared to peek again, just a few seconds later, the driveway was empty, but like he'd never been there. But I knew what I had seen. I knew this wasn't just some figment of my imagination anymore, because every night he was coming closer, and sooner or later he'd reach the house. By the 5th week in that house, I wasn't sleeping at all. Every creak, Every groan of the wooden floors made my chest tighten. I kept thinking about how he got closer each night. Closer to the house, closer to me. Then one night I woke to a sound that didn't belong. It wasn't the hum of the refrigerator or the old pipes shifting. It was footsteps. Slow, heavy, right outside our front porch. I held my breath, straining my ears. First I thought maybe my dad had stepped outside, but the sound didn't match. It wasn't the shuffle of slippers. It was deliberate, measured, almost like someone was pacing back and forth across the wood planks of the porch. I gathered the courage to creep toward the living room window. The curtains were half drawn, leaving a sliver of space to peek through, and my stomach dropped the moment I looked outside. He was there, not at the gate, not in the driveway, but standing directly on our porch. His face was inches away from the glass. His eyes, cold, gray, and hollow, stared into the house. He tilted his head slightly, as if listening for movement. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the couch, but when I blinked, he was gone. The porch was empty. I ran upstairs to wake my parents, but by the time they checked, there was nothing. No sign anyone had been there. They told me it must have been a dream, but I knew better. My pulse was still racing. The image of his pale face burned into my mind. For the next few nights, I didn't dare go near the windows, but avoiding him didn't stop it. The sounds kept coming. First the porch, and the back door. And one night, the unmistakable creak of the basement steps. I told myself over and over, he can't get inside. He can't get inside. But deep down, I wasn't so sure anymore. Because one evening, while I was brushing my teeth, I saw something in the mirror, just behind me in the hallway. A reflection of someone tall, thin. Standing completely still, I spun around. The hallway was empty, but the bathroom light flickered once, twice, before going completely dark. I bolted out, my heart racing, refusing to look back. The final straw came 2 nights later. I woke up at exactly 3:03 a.m. The room was freezing cold, my breath fogging the air like it was the dead of winter. And then I heard it. A knock, not at the door, but inside the house. 3 slow, heavy knocks against the wall of my bedroom. I sat frozen in my bed, too terrified to move. And then, through the thin crack of my bedroom door, I saw it. A shadow, not cast by the moonlight, not cast by anything real. It stretched across the hallway floor, long and thin, moving toward my room. The door creaked open an inch, and in the silence of the house a voice whispered, "I never left." The moment I heard that whisper, I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. My throat felt locked, as if fear itself had stolen my voice. I just sat there in the dark, staring at the narrow crack in my door. The shadow lingered in the hallway, long, unnatural, and then it moved, slowly, sliding along the floor toward my room. I snapped out of my frozen state and grabbed the lamp from my nightstand. With shaking hands, I switched it on, flooding the room with warm light, and just like that, the shadow was gone. The hallway looked empty, silent, normal to normal. The next morning I tried to tell my parents again, but they didn't want to hear it anymore. "You're overworked," my dad said. "You need rest," my mom insisted. They even offered to let me stay at my cousin's place for a few nights, but I refused. Something inside me knew. If I left, he wouldn't just disappear, he would follow. That night I decided to stay awake, to wait for him, to finally see what he wanted. I sat in the living room, lights dimmed, every muscle tense. The clock ticked past midnight. 1 a.m., 2 a.m., silence, nothing, and then at exactly 3:03 again. I heard the back door creak. I turned my head slowly, my breath caught in my chest. The door eased open, and there he was, the neighbor, inside my house. He looked exactly as he always did, the same button-up shirt, the same slacks, but his skin was paler than ever. His smile was gone, and his eyes, they were nothing but two dark hollows. He stepped forward, each movement deliberate, heavy, echoing on the wooden floor. I wanted to run. My legs refused to move. It was like he had drained the strength out of me just by being there. Finally, I managed to whisper, "What do you want?" His head tilted, his lips curled, but it wasn't a smile. It was something cruel, something hollow. And in a voice that seemed to rattle the walls, he said, "I never left this house." The lights flickered violently. The room grew colder, my breath visible in the air. And in that instant, I realized the truth. He wasn't just some spirit haunting the street. He belonged here, this house, the one my parents were so happy to buy. This wasn't our home, it was still his. I stumbled backward, fumbling for the lamp. But before I could switch it on, he was suddenly inches away from me, his hollow eyes locked on mine, his face so close I could feel the icy air rolling off him. And then, in the lowest whisper, he added, "You can't make me leave." I slammed the lamp on, and just like that, the room was empty. He was gone. But the cold remained, and deep down I knew that wouldn't be the last time. The next morning, I told myself it had to be a dream. Maybe sleep deprivation was twisting my mind. Maybe I wanted so badly to make sense of things that I invented it all. But the chill in the living room lingered long after sunrise, and the memory of his hollow eyes refused to fade. That evening, while we ate dinner, my mom paused, mid-bite. "Do you hear that?" she asked. We all went silent. At first, nothing. Then faint footsteps creaking across the upstairs hallway. But nobody was up there. My dad stood, annoyed. "Old house," he muttered. "What expands makes noise." He tried to laugh it off, but the look on my mom's face told me she wasn't convinced. Neither was I later that night. My parents were in the living room watching TV. I was upstairs, scrolling through my phone, trying to distract myself. That's when I heard my mom scream. I bolted downstairs, my heart racing. She was standing by the window, pale as a ghost. I ran to her. "What happened?" She pointed at the backyard, her hand trembling. "I saw someone," she whispered, "standing by the tree, just watching." I looked out the glass. The yard was empty, dark, still. But deep down, I knew exactly who she had seen. My dad brushed it off again, saying it was probably a trespasser. But the way he locked every door and double-checked every window afterward told me otherwise. He didn't believe his own words. That night we all tried to sleep, but the house wouldn't let us. The walls creaked, the air turned icy cold, and the faint sound of breathing seemed to echo through the halls. I lay in bed, clutching the covers, when I heard my brother's door swing open across the hall. Then silence. I got up, heart hammering, and peeked out. My brother was standing in the middle of the hallway, facing the stairs. "Hey," I whispered. "What are you doing?" He didn't answer. He just raised his hand and pointed toward the bottom of the staircase. I followed his gaze, and there he was. The neighbor, standing on the first step, staring up at us. His hollow eyes fixed on me, his body unnaturally still, like a shadow carved out of the night itself. My brother gasped, finally breaking out of his trance. He stumbled back into his room, slamming the door. I flicked the hallway light on in panic. And just like before, the neighbor vanished. Gone. But this time, It wasn't just me. My family had seen him too. There was no denying it anymore. He was real, and he wasn't going anywhere. After that night, the tension in our house became unbearable. No one talked about it out loud, but we all felt the same thing. The house wasn't ours anymore. It belonged to him. My mom started sleeping with the lights on. My brother wouldn't step into the hallway alone, and my dad, once so stubborn, was suddenly quiet, withdrawn, like he knew there was nothing he could do. It was around 2 a.m. when it finally happened. I woke up to the sound of my door creaking open. At first, I thought it was my brother, too scared to sleep in his own room. But when I whispered his name, the answer came in silence. A heavy, suffocating silence. Then I saw it. A shadow stretching across the floor, long and distorted, reaching toward my bed. My pulse thundered in my ears as the figure stepped into view. It was him, the neighbor, except now he wasn't outside. He was inside my room. His face was even more terrifying up close, skin so pale it almost glowed in the dark. Eyes black and hollow like bottomless pits. And that smile, that awful frozen smile, it didn't look human anymore. I tried to scream, but my voice caught in my throat. All I could do was watch as he drifted closer. Not walking, not moving like a normal person, but gliding, like the air itself carried him forward. He stopped right at the edge of my bed, leaning down, inches from my face. And in a voice that sounded like 100 whispers all at once, he said, "You let me in." That broke me. I scrambled out of bed and bolted to my parents' room. They were already awake, sitting upright, pale and trembling. Before I could even speak, we all heard it, heavy, deliberate footsteps in the hallway. Slow, steady, coming closer. The doorknob twisted. My dad jumped up, bracing the door with all his weight. The knob rattled violently, then stopped. Silence. We waited, holding our breath. Then came 3 knocks, slow, even like he was taunting us. My mom started crying. My brother clung to her side, shaking. And then, the bedroom light flickered, buzzing like it was about to burn out. For a split second, the bulb went dark. And in that split second, he was inside. He stood in the corner of the room, grinning, his black eyes darting from one of us to the other. My dad shouted, swinging a lamp at him, but the object went straight through, like hitting smoke. The neighbor didn't flinch, didn't move. He just whispered again, "You can't keep me out." The air grew so cold we could see our breath. The walls groaned like they were alive. And then, the neighbor stepped closer, closer, until it felt like the whole room was collapsing in on us. That's when my dad made the only decision he could. "Get out," he yelled. "Everybody out." We didn't argue. We ran, out of the bedroom, down the stairs, through the front door, not even bothering to grab shoes or coats. We sprinted into the street, barefoot and terrified, while behind us, every single light in the house flickered on and off like a dying heartbeat. And in the upstairs window, we saw him, watching, smiling, as if the house was his all along. We didn't stop running until we reached the end of the block. Out of breath, barefoot, shaking so badly it felt like our bones would snap. But even there, standing under the dim streetlight, none of us felt safe. Because every single one of us could still feel it, that awful presence, watching. My dad called his friend across town. We didn't explain much, just begged to come over. Minutes later, we were in the car, speeding away, refusing to look back at the house. But I couldn't help myself. I turned, just for a second, and there he was, the neighbor, standing in the middle of the street, watching us go, smiling. At my dad's friend's house, no one slept. We stayed in the living room with the lights on, too scared to close our eyes. The silence stretched on, heavy and unbearable, until finally, around 4 a.m., I started to think, maybe, just maybe, we had escaped. But that's when I heard it. 3 knocks. Soft. Even at the front door, my stomach dropped. We didn't move, didn't breathe. Then came another knock and another, like he had followed us here, like he was reminding us. We could never run far enough. The knocking stopped after a while. The house went still again, but none of us dared open the door. We left town the very next morning, packed whatever we could fit into the car and never looked back. The house we once called home, we abandoned it. Someone else probably lives there now. Maybe they've seen him too. Maybe they will. It's been years since that night. We don't talk about it much. But sometimes late at night, I feel it again. That same cold heaviness in the air. The sensation of eyes locked on me even when I'm alone. And sometimes when I glance out the window, I swear I see him, standing under the streetlight, unmoving, smiling, like he's waiting. Because here's the truth I've learned, the part that no one wants to hear. You can change houses. You can change towns. You can run as far as you want, but you can't escape him. Because once you've seen the neighbor who wasn't there, he'll always be there.